time to welcome Hoosier fans to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most interesting topics in the world of Indiana basketball, which some weeks is easier than others. This is our 178th edition of Assembly Call Radio and is our 633rd episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, July 16th, 2020. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion. Martin takes a shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
Well, in a week like this, I get a note left in the run sheet that says, good luck with this one for the banner moment from Jared. So I'm going to go a little IU related, but not directly related to IU hanging a banner. But for those of us who have missed sports a great deal, the basketball tournament, or the TBT that just finished up earlier this week, proved to be one that was successful from the way it was run standpoint, and may provide some kind of blueprint for what other sports are trying to do. They really managed any kind of coronavirus outbreaks quickly and were really clear on how they were going to do that, and turned out to be a really entertaining tournament as it's become over the course of time. And in the final for the sideline cancer team, I got to watch Mo Creek and Remy Abel play for that team. And both those guys just played huge roles in that team's trip to the finals. I think they were seeded, they were like the 22nd ranked team going in. So they ended up playing an extra game to get where they were. They eventually lost at the end, and Creek, kind of crumbled to the ground. It was just really distraught about not winning, but he had hit the game winner to get him there. With the Elam ending, and both those guys really, really excelled. Mo showed some flashes, although he doesn't get around probably as well as he did when he first was at IU, but kind of deceptively was still able to get to the basket, did a really good job. Remy Abel was really strong defensively and played well. So it was cool to see a couple former Hoosiers really playing well and being able to watch some basketball, quite honestly. So perhaps just the fact that was able to watch a series of basketball games over a couple of weeks is as banner moment as any. But congrats to those guys for making it that far, for a really strong showing. And it was, I think I speak for a lot of IU fans saying that it was really fun to watch those guys make that run, watch them play, and see just how big a part of their team they were. So with that, let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left,
remembers the days when a movie cost $1. Heaven help you if you ever decide to pop your collar. Play hard, but remember, fake hustle is a crime. He's the coach and it's Tonsoni time.
Coach, what's on your mind this week?
Well, you're always searching for stuff in the middle of the summer on a normal year, and then you've had some delays in players showing up in the summer. But what's on my mind is that Indiana continues to be able to have some voluntary workouts, haven't had any setbacks. We don't get a lot of information about what's going on, but they're in the weight room with Coach Marshall, getting better, getting acclimated to the school, so that's got to be exciting. I also say that, Indiana University has a lot of athletes, and it means a lot to them, as you mentioned, playing basketball at Indiana, but playing sports in general, as Mo Creek really wanted that win for more than just the $1 million prize. You can tell he was a huge competitor. I had the good fortune to join our friends at Hoosier Headlines and talk to a volleyball player and her desire to do well, but also her interest in mental health. And it reminded me that our basketball athletes, our football athletes, our young men and women that are pursuing careers and knowledge and maybe a sport that'll help them in the future. And that just makes me really want things to go smoothly and see competition and have normalcy in athletics back, because they work hard in the classroom and they work hard on the courts and fields in Bloomington. So hoping that this can continue this summer workout and we get sports as we normally can as soon as possible.
I would agree with that. And to my left,
Analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never lifted a finger. He's got all the
Well, let me quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
He is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, I know you've said you've been spending the day talking about the Washington football team. So perhaps even what little IU basketball news we have to talk through tonight is a welcome distraction for you. But what else do you have on your mind this week?
It is. I want to echo what Coach said. I thought it was great to see Remy Abel and Mo Creek playing in that TBT. It was really fun. A blast from the past. Travis Diener nailing a 3 to win the whole thing. That was kind of fun. I think that, we've had no negative reports coming out really of from Indiana being back on campus. I think that's another thing to sort of be thankful for. You see other schools having to shut down or maybe not following the right protocols and all that stuff. So just like a non-negative week, I guess, is what I would say when there's so much negativity floating around with college sports. To hear some, not have any of it emanating from Indiana is right now feels like a bonus. So just a positive there that everything seems to be going okay at IU with, I think the exception of I saw a few positive COVID tests, but it didn't seem alarming or anything. Only, I think it was like 4 of the, over 100 they tested. So again, positive so far.
Yep, I would agree. Far more positive than negative, and I think at this point that's all we'll is as good a news as we might get. So this week, planning to talk through a few things. We've got a handful of headlines here that we'll hit on here in a minute. We're going to talk about the incoming freshmen. We've done more in-depth scouting reports on each of them as they've committed. This is a little bit more of an overview, but we had finished the series of returning players. So wanted to circle back and talk through a few questions about the incoming guys, and then we'll answer your questions as we always do in the final segment. It's all coming up this week on Assembly Call Radio. And before we get to all of that, a few quick announcements. Again, please continue to support our friends at Home Field. You can find them at homefieldapparel.com and use the promo code assembly20 at checkout for 20% off your order. They launched their first of, I believe, at least 15 teams, new teams last week as part of their big new Saturday. Tulane was the first one out. A lot of really cool designs that I managed to restrain myself from ordering any more of as we went. They've also got a subscription service if you want to sign up to get shirts from the series that they've got planned. So a lot of great things going on there from our friends Connor and everybody else at Home Field Apparel. So with that, guys, Hoosier Headlines this week. The first one is a somber note. Steve Bouchie passed away at 59 following complications from a heart attack that he suffered over July 4th weekend. Bouchie was the Mr. Basketball in 1979, was the first Mr. Basketball from Washington, was then they've had 3 since then and all the Zeller brothers, but he was the first from there in 1979, was a member of the 1981 NCAA championship team, a member of 3 Big Ten champions, and was inducted into the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame in 2009. Sad to see his passing. Had played 110 career games at IU, averaged 5, a little bit over a game, and a few words. Archie tweeted out something about being saddened to hear of his passing, and so like I said, kind of sad news there. Coach, I know some of that was around the time that you had started to get into IU basketball, so didn't know if you had any thoughts, memories of watching Steve Bouchie play that you wanted to share.
That was right back when I got started. I remember him. He had a nice little jumper, 12-foot jumper for a big guy. It wasn't a prototypical post-up that I remember. But he was, again, that type of Indiana player that we all admire, that guy that understands his role and then executes his role to the best and helps the team win. As you mentioned, the championships and the Big Ten championships. And that's every team needs those kinds of players. And he was one of those. And it's just from a personal standpoint, as you start getting my age at 53, and we've had a few past Indiana players that have passed away recently, some quite a bit older than myself, but Steve Bouchie is in my era. That just, it makes it a little more somber from my end, because those are the guys that really brought me into Indiana basketball, and you wish nothing but the best for him and his family.
Yeah, and then Ryan, you had touched on one of the other topics that we had to talk through here. So between of the COVID tests administered between June 24th and July 8th, there were 112. There were 4 positives, 108 negatives. And overall, since the testing began, those were the only 4 positives and 295 negative tests overall. So again, as we said, I think, and I think we've seen that a lot with a number of these colleges that have released numbers. They're all doing it a little bit differently and releasing things on a different cadence. And I think this is the time of year that you're probably a bit better able to manage some of that. The challenge really becomes as other students start to come back on campus in large numbers. Can you really keep that up? Because to a certain extent, you can. It's not completely a bubble. There are certainly people in Bloomington. Some students stay there year round, so it's not like it's a complete ghost town. But we all know from having been there that there's a huge difference, between the summer and when classes start back up. So it's a good sign that they've been able to do this now. I think, Ryan, the real question becomes, how are you able to sustain what you've done? What practices can you put in place to make sure that things don't start to spike in the way we've seen in a lot of other places?
Yeah, and I think one of the big things is this summer you need to learn a lot. You need to learn the best practices. You need to learn what works. You need to learn, okay, there are 4 people who got positives. How they get positives. Let's figure that out. Let's, figure out what they were doing, who they were interacting with. Okay, let's cut that out. Let's make sure you're doing X, Y, and Z properly. I think that's what this summer is really about, and why it's good for athletics to actually have the students back now, because they can get ahead of the curve if we're going to have college athletics this year, and hopefully we do. But if you don't, you're seeing the reason why a lot of people are thinking we're not going to have college athletics. You're seeing some of these schools come back to campus and just have it decimate their athletic departments to where the point where a lot of schools have shut down their voluntary workouts because of it. So you've got to be able to manage this. You've got to make sure your kids are taking it seriously. You've got to make sure that everybody involved is taking it seriously, because again, we're not going to get college athletics unless everybody's taking all this stuff seriously. So I think it's a good thing to have them on campus now to sort of work out the kinks with the protocols, maybe bump the protocols up and make it more stringent. But whatever they're doing, they need to continue to improve on it and adjust. And we're all adjusting our lives to this thing. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, schools were all going to be back in session in person. Then a second, some more, I guess it's not a second wave, but another wave of the virus hits. And you're seeing everybody talk about how, well, no, now we're not going to do in-person classes. I mean, things can change. We're seeing things change week to week with this. And so I think that the school needs to be nimble. I think the Big Ten needs to be nimble on this stuff. And, if there was any leadership whatsoever from the NCAA, which there hasn't been, they would need to be nimble as well in trying to figure out the best ways to approach this and attack this.
Yeah, really. Go ahead, Coach.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think it's interesting. I think Indiana's trying to do a nice job with the mask up for each other, the athletes on social media. Small thing, and I think that's important. And so you're seeing some education of the athletes in that way. The big question to me is when everyone's back on campus and the events start happening off campus and things, those will be hard to say no to if you're a college-age kid. And you just need to realize that there is something down the road in this crazy times to make sure to spend a year being abnormal, to have some level of normalcy instead of jumping right into normal and having it shut down. But I do appreciate Indiana's attempt to share who you're masking up for. And it's always someone in another program. So that's that 24 sports one team mentality being displayed here in the health situation.
Yeah, I would agree. Just in terms of other news along those lines, I think we've seen a couple other football conferences say they weren't going to play games in the fall. That being, I think, the Patriot League and the MEAC are the ones that I can think of. Other leagues have come out and said they're not going to play non-conference games following the lead of the Big Ten.
And frankly, just to jump in, that's where we're headed. I think everybody's going to no non-conference. I think that at the very least, that's going to be the decision.
Yeah, so I think they have that still going, and then basketball-wise, there's a little bit of an ability to wait a bit longer and see what happens. As Ryan, as you said, everything's changing pretty rapidly. Anything else, Ryan, from your perspective that you've seen this week that I'm forgetting about from at least collegiate sports-wise that's happened that may make us feel better, worse, or the same?
Not really. I think you're seeing a lot of conferences have meetings and not pull the trigger on going no non-conference like the Big Ten and the Pac-12 did. But I think that they all know that's where they're headed. I think the SEC, when the SEC does it, everybody else is going to fall in line. I don't know if the SEC will be the next conference. They may be the last conference to do it. But if the SEC does it, everyone else is going to be, well, if the SEC is not doing it, we're not going to do it. We're not going to play out a conference game. So I really think that that's where we're headed. And the reason why, and we've talked about this, is there's no leadership from the NCAA. So these conferences all have different protocols for what they're doing. And that's not the way this should be. The NCAA needs to lead from the front. And Mac Brown today was on Paul Feinbaum's show saying, we need a commissioner of college football because the NCAA is doing nothing. At least if there were one person making decisions for all of us, we could, or at least consulting with conference commissioners, they could come up with a consensus. But right now, the NCAA just feels like it's this nebulous organization above all of the schools, not doing anything, just saying, best practices, do what you can, and not coming up with hardened guidelines. And so each conference has had to do it themselves. And if that's the case, I mean, you can't go to another campus that's outside your conference with different protocols and expect to be safe. So I think that's the real problem here is the NCAA has not stepped up at all. The national leadership has not been there. So I think that's who to blame in all of this. And the conferences are going to do the best they can, but we don't know how good that's going to be. So we'll see. Hopefully, I mean, look, I'm a huge college sports fan. Obviously, I do this as part of my living. And I want college sports to happen in the fall, but I also recognize the reality that, if this isn't handled correctly, it could be a complete disaster that college sports don't recover from for a long time.
Yep. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. One of the, I think it was this week, they're all kind of run together, but I think it was the Iowa State athletic director had, released a statement and, or sent a message to ticket holders and basically kind of went through the economics, even for a Big 12 program, of what this would mean. And I think you're right, Ryan, the ramifications of it are pretty far reaching if you get to a point where you're saying, hey, we can't play at all, but these people are being forced to make difficult decisions in an really unprecedented time that there's no playbook in terms of how to handle. So I think they're trying to push things down the road as long as they can, but eventually you're going to run out of road and have to make a decision, and hopefully things improve before we get to that point. All right. Well, coming up on the assembly call, we are going to talk through the freshmen, complete our offseason player preview series by doing that. Talk about strengths, weaknesses, and how many minutes we project each to receive this season. Stick with us. All right. 1804.
Just going to read through this post real quick, make sure I didn't make any egregious typos while I was doing that. It's already published, though, so, multitasking.
Good work.
That's how you're supposed to do it, right? I'm going to tell Amy, English department, have them publish it first and then
post first,
yeah,
edit
then
later.
read it out. I mean, I went over it, but I
afterwards.
went over it while you guys were talking, so I'm not, it's I already have ADD. It's like, what? No.
Hey, how do we feel about the Elam ending?
Yeah, I have that in the last segment. So
okay.
I thought if we needed an extra question, I would put it in there. I don't know that you could. I don't know that it makes sense for like college basketball, but It is fun.
It's fun. You know what? I think it's great for that tournament. I think it's great for
All-Star games.
All-Star games. I thought the one for the NBA was great. I mean, it didn't end on a free throw or something, but it was still great and gave him something to pursue. And so it's not the kind of thing where like with 5 minutes left on the clock, they're like, oh, we got to start playing hard now. Like they're actually attacking a number. So I think that was good. You could do it in preseason games. You could do it in maybe the NIT or something. But, as far as regular, normal NCAA basketball, I don't like it for that.
I'm a traditionalist. I don't want to see it, but I am intrigued because
it's fun.
It forces you to play defense instead of fouling to get back in the game. You got to get stops.
Yep. No, I completely
6 points
agree with that.
down, and the target scores, you got to score 12 to their 6. You got to get stops, which is the game of basketball, and fouling is not necessarily the game of basketball. I mean,
yeah, no, I completely agree that
but
it's a blast and it makes the end of games a little bit fun. I do believe that. First of all, it's never going to be adapted to the NBA.
No.
I mean, it's never going to happen. But they could have some fun with it.
There was one of those games that I was watching. It was, I mean, somebody went on like almost like an 18-0 run. I mean, they were getting smoked, and it was actually one of those where it probably hurt them a little bit, because if you had a little more time on the clock, you might have actually been able to complete the comeback. But they still, I mean, made it an interesting game from what was nothing even at that point, which credit to those guys for keeping playing, because they were down so much by the time they got to the Elam ending. I'm thinking, what in the world? Like, there's no way. But they did make it interesting. I forget which game it was.
And Andy, did you see the new suggestion for bracketology with conference basketball games only that came out today?
Well, I saw some people throwing around about like a one-time expansion of the field or something like that. Is that what you're talking about, or something else?
This guy, I forget who to give credit to, but he said to make it like European soccer, where every league has a certain number of bids, and then that league can decide how they get their bids, whether it be a conference champion plus the top 6, or you go top 7, and to give the number of bids to leagues this year over the last 5-year average. So the Big Ten would have 7 bids, and then it's up to the Big Ten to figure out.
Oh no, I didn't see
how
this.
they
I
split
didn't
them
see
up.
this at all.
How that's going
It
to go.
sounds like it's like how you make the Champions League in soccer, basically.
Yeah, you know,
like
if you finish 6th or 4th, whatever, you get to go to this European tournament for 1 year, and then seeding would be based on traditional seeding. ACC, the first seed, the best team in the ACC is a 1.2. It totally takes our job out of business as bracketologists. But they said without the preseason games to delineate and schedule strength and big wins, that it might be an interesting way that everyone knows the marker.
And you know, going in, look, we have to finish 6th in the league or we don't get in.
Yeah,
there's no
top
like
6 or win the conference, right? Or
you know,
the furthest team, not in the top 6 that goes on, or something like that.
Yeah,
it'd be interesting.
And so it's not this nebulous thing of like, well, we got to win 20 games, but we got to win a couple on the road, and we got to do this or whatever. It's just you finish at that point, you get in. Yeah, that would be interesting if it's a short season. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what you.
Because there's no measuring stick games outside the conference.
No.
The conference, you never
that
know.
does so much to establish overall league strength.
Yeah.
The Big Ten's benefited from that a lot in the last couple of years.
And this year,
Which kind of stinks for some of the man. I don't know what the averages would be for a league like the A10 or something like that. Like if their average ends up being 1, that kind of sucks, because it probably wouldn't be. I guess maybe they
well, that's what
get in
the
over the course of time, but it would be.
Yeah.
It would be hard if their average was that, because like Richmond's supposed to be pretty good this year. St. Louis is supposed to be good.
What they could do is add like the top team from like this many like smaller conferences gets in automatically, but then there are play-in games for second place for all these conferences, and you don't get in the field. But if you play that team and win, then you're in the field. You know, almost like make a bunch of play-in games to get in.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
11-9 Big Ten team, do they get in? I mean, you look at 11-9, and someone from another conference goes 13-7, but the conference isn't as strong. It would. I think a normal selection year will be real crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no precedence to look back at. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, you can't really look back at your history and be like, oh, this happened for this team, and this. So,
it just dawned on me. Would there be more than 20-game conference schedule? Would they add games?
I'm not sure.
Play full round robin, just beat the hell out of each other for
full round robin, 26 games.
26 games. Just
that's rough.
You know,
Big
Ten teams would be riding an ambulance into the tournament.
They might do the kind of thing where they say no non-conference like big travel games, but you can play 2 teams from your state. You know, and those teams have to abide by only if they agree to your protocols for coming to campus. You know, like, so Indiana can play like Evansville and Indiana State. You know, because they're driving distance or whatever.
Still play the Crosstown Classic then, right? You got
especially because you got major conference teams who are probably all going to be pretty similar. It's when you start really going up and down tiers in terms of
schedule strength.
Leagues is where you're really going to run into
like
people who have
the Maui Invitational
an inability to follow the protocols of what they would want.
The Maui Invitational keeps saying that the term is going to happen, and I think there's one case on Maui right now.
That's what I'd keep saying if I was the Maui Invitational too.
Yeah, it's like there's one case in Hawaii right now. There's one case in the state of Hawaii. I think I read that the other day. I don't know if that's still the case, but there was one of this. If you bring in fans from all these states, you're going to get way more. If I'm Hawaii, I'm like, nope, not happening. Like, I mean, we don't know where it's going to be in November, but
yeah.
I mean, you know, they're not going to have fans at the arena anyway, but still, people who already had plans to go out there might go.
Wasn't there something announced yesterday too, that one of the preseason tournaments in Cancun or something is moved to Florida? Which the way Florida's going right now is not very smart.
Yeah, I heard rumors that they
feels
were
like you
move
should
a couple
be
of those.
going away from Florida as fast as you
send
possibly
them
go to
can.
Rhode Island or
Cancun.
something.
What are you doing?
Right?
Yeah,
where no one, no one's getting this.
They're going to start
Don't
playing
go to-
games in like Saskatoon. Like,
NBA's
just
in
as
Orlando.
far away from people as possible.
Yeah, I think this
We
is
need
the
a
right.
we need a snitch line. That's what we need. Assembly call snitch line, like the NBA does. So
By
we
the
can
way,
snitch
big
on people
fan.
in the
I'm
chat mob, or like Megan, if she does something crazy in Bloomington, we can.
Big
play the
fan of the NBA snitch hotline. Big fan. Big fan. You can't follow the rules. You deserve to get called out. I'm sorry.
Who's a dumbass who ordered DoorDash or something and stepped
Oh,
outside of the
Rashawn
bubble?
Holmes. Yeah.
Come
Rashawn
on,
Holmes.
dude.
Yeah. King Center.
Yeah, they got so the teams in Maui, you got Alabama, so
That's
They're
good.
rising in cases.
yep, you got Davidson,
North Carolina.
which is in North Carolina. Then you got North Carolina, so you got 2 from North Carolina where they've been pretty high. You got Providence, you got Stanford, Texas, and UNLV. So Vegas, just bring Vegas to Maui. That seems like
Just play it in Vegas.
What could go wrong? What could go wrong?
Put them in a bubble at one of the hotels and play it in the ballroom.
Who knows?
Play it in a ballroom. You've
you
been
might
on
as
road
well.
trip. Coach, you've been on road trips where you got to do your walkthrough in a ballroom, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's always fun because the kids are like, "Where's the hoop?" It's like, what the hotel doesn't just have a hoop; it can roll in for you guys. Like,
Yeah, we did it in an outdoor courtyard in Warsaw, Indiana, for a regional. Yeah, we didn't constantly do a bar. We had a film, a television with the VCR wheeled into our room though, in between games. That was nice. That's about as big time as I get. But we did win the regional, so
it all worked.
There you
Whatever
go.
you
All
done
worked
must
out.
have been right. Must have been right.
Bringing
pushed
in
up
those,
the bush there
bringing
in
in those
the courtyard.
Yeah, bringing in those banquet chairs into the ballroom, those big heavy, and just like that's the offense. Here's where you're playing. You know.
Hey, and I'm biased towards managers because my boys. But you see some of those guys put the floor down in the ballroom. They tape up the logo
they tape
and all that
off
stuff. Hire managers.
Yeah, man. Hire them to your businesses. Definitely.
Yeah.
Those guys work hard. All right. Let's talk freshmen. Let's talk some freshmen.
Yeah, we got a good probably 20 plus minutes we can spend on this. So if we can do these questions, but whatever other directions we want to hit would be fine. Let's see here. All right.
Hey guys, it's Gene Steratore, CBS officiating analyst and retired Big Ten basketball official. You know, I have never listened to the assembly call, and to be honest, I don't intend to. If you listen, make sure you ignore anything Ryan says about officiating. He's really good from the seat of his pants, but I wouldn't trust him on the court with a whistle around his neck. Time has proven him wrong on virtually everything. Take care. We'll talk soon.
Oh, never gets old. Thank you, Gene.
Oh, Gene.
That's one I picked that one partly just because I think if you guys are like me, it's been kind of a long week. Not a lot of good news to be had on any number of fronts, and it's just kind of like that it's hard not to smile about that. And every time that you think he's done, then I forget that he throws in the time has proven him wrong on almost everything. So perfect, just good stuff. But
Jared paid extra to get the second half of that put in there.
It was worth every penny, whatever it was. With that, welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mob during our unedited live broadcast or watch those replays and see all the between segment banter, then check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and the coach Brian Tonsoni. And we finished up the player previews for all the returning players. And so we figured the best place to go would be to talk to freshmen. We've done, I think at various points over as they committed, basically a show or a segment dedicated to Ryan's in-depth scouting report of all those guys. So we're not going to do individual shows for each one, but kind of thought we would turn it into a little bit of a roundtable about all 4 guys. So within this, you've got Christian Lander, Trey Galloway, Anthony Leal, and Jordan Geronimo, which I'm sure all IU fans know, but we'll throw those out there. So just kind of had a few questions that we thought we would hit and talk about, use to frame up our thoughts on their outlook for the season. So first question that I had thrown out was, what's the most important skill or attribute that will get them on the floor, either early on or throughout their freshman season? So we'll kind of take these, I guess, in the order that I listed them off. So Christian Lander. So Coach, I'll throw this to you first. What gets him on the floor early and often?
I think his ability to create, if he is as advertised with his speed and his handle and his ability to push the basketball, I think that brings another weapon to the Indiana offensive attack. And high school kids are one thing. You got to be able to prove it. He is coming in a year earlier. Those are some concerns. We'll talk about that a little later. But can he really push the pace? Can he score the basketball from outside in the lane and score against Big Ten competition? But I think the speed of him with the basketball and being an initiator, there's been some videos that came out just recently where he has some nice feeds up the court with his head up and on the fast break, and he seems like a knack, at least at the high school level, to find guys trailing the break or when he's driving and kicking. He shared the basketball, and I didn't see him play all his minutes, so I don't know if there are other times where he should have shared it a little bit more. But you only get so much from a 5-minute YouTube clip. You get all the good things, you don't get some of the bad things. But I'm interested in the pace, and I think that gets him on the floor and gets him major minutes. Ryan, what about you?
I couldn't decide between two because I think they're equally important for him. And it's the speed, as Coach mentioned, just his ability to get up and down the floor. And that's what Archie Miller has been looking for a little more of out of his point guard. The other is his vision and his ability to create for others. Now, those things kind of tie in, his speed and ability to get into a good position to create for others. So they kind of tie in, but it's both of those things that he does that puts him above other people on this team, if it translates well and everything. But yeah, his ability to create and open things up for other people using his vision and his anticipation on the floor, and of course that speed to get the ball up the floor. I think it's both.
Yeah, I think with him, those are really the clear answers. Jared had written in the sheet about pace. We talked about all those times Archie's imploring these guys to push the ball up the floor, do some of those things. I don't think that's something he's going to have to ask Lander to do a whole lot. And for a team that has struggled a lot offensively, a guy who can get them into, get defenses into more scramble situations, try to get some easy buckets just by pushing the ball up the floor, using that vision.
Especially with a guy like Trace, who runs the floor. I mean, you get the ball up the floor quickly, you get him in a good spot to get a quick bucket.
Yeah, just, and I think the playmaking thing is an important one as well. You get in a late shot clock situation. Do you have a guy that can really break somebody down and get into the lane, even if he's not the guy to shoot? I think that's something that's also Finney has shown at times an ability to do that, but it's been inconsistent. So I think those are the things with him. All right, so we'll move next to Trey Galloway. So, Coach, I think anybody who's listened to you talk probably knows what you're going to say about what gets Trey Galloway on the floor, but I'll let you say it instead of putting words in your mouth for you.
I never use the word toughness.
Not once.
But toughness will get him on the floor. His ability to guard and his ability to stir things up. There are times as coaches where your team's flat or things just aren't going your way, and you want to give it to a guy who will stir up some crap. Legally, a Will Sheehy type, where you go in and you agitate, and that agitation then feeds the crowd, if we have a crowd, and then it feeds off to the other players as well. And you can also change momentum with defense and stopping someone that has been giving you trouble or giving the team trouble for 10 minutes. Go in and shut them down for 2 or 3 minutes, get the game back into a place where you can make a charge. And then I think he is also the ability to get out on the run. If they're having success running, that's where he's going to be on his best offensively, as opposed to half-court set offense. So if they're in a situation where he can defend, get some steals, and get out and go, he's going to get out there. But he's just, if he plays in college the way he did in high school, it's his toughness, and he's a coach's kid. So he's been through the ringer, having to listen to dad all the time when he's driving home, getting coached, and then getting the old dad lecture, which is a double dose, makes him ready to play.
Ryan?
It's an easy one for me. It's his effort, and I guess if you call it a motor, whatever. He just doesn't quit when he's on the court, and he plays hard. And there are times that we've seen sometimes this Indiana roster the last couple of years has kind of had like a collapse in energy. And whether that's they're worn out, they're tired, whatever, we've had these guys with injuries and things like that it shortens the bench and guys get worn out from playing, maybe playing in positions they're not supposed to. You need somebody to come in and just provide energy. And that was what Victor Oladipo was so good at, even before his junior year where he became a star. He would come in and and Coach mentioned him, he as well, come in and provide energy. And I think that Galloway will do that immediately. In the long run, I agree that he might be the guy that is like a defensive stopper, can do all these different versatile things for you. But immediately what he provides as a freshman is energy. And he's just going to up the pace of everybody who's on the floor, because he's going to be a guy who goes out, dives on the floor, and goes after basketballs and is always given 100%. And I think that's what makes him special as a freshman. I think he can develop into more, but right now he's that energy guy.
Ryan, you brought up a point. A lot of times, especially on the road, in games that got out of hand, 13, 15, there was a huge run, generally at the 15, 14 mark of the second half, where maybe you could use him as a spark. It seemed like this team got down, felt sorry for itself, whether they were struggling on the offensive end or whatever, and they'd give up an 18-2 run and game's over. That he's the type of guy that you could put in for that and dive on, for a loose ball, kind of a scholarship McRoberts. Better than probably McRoberts, but we loved McRoberts because he would do all those things and dive and hustle. I remember one at the half court where he dove out of bounds, saved it, Indiana scores, and next thing you know, there's a roll. So you could use people like that to stop negative runs, and that happened way too much for the team last year, those negative runs, especially on the road.
And again, I think that as in the long run in his career, he develops into more of that. He can score. I think his shot's going to get better. He can handle the ball, all of those things. But if you're looking at the one attribute that's going to get him on the floor quickly, it's that energy.
Yep. I would agree with you guys. So I won't belabor that. I think the hustle, Ryan, you used the word spark, or Coach, I think you jumped in and used that. That's the one thing that I was really thinking of. Can you, if you see the energy get low, is he a guy that you can throw out there to do that? And I think defensively, he's also got some versatility to guard different positions. Next up, Anthony Leal. Ryan, I'll throw this one to you first. What gets him on the floor? Again, this one feels like a relatively simple answer based on what this team has lacked and what he's most known for.
It's his shooting. And to some degree, his basketball IQ too. I mean, he's played a lot of basketball. He knows what he's getting into going to Indiana, and he knows the level he's going to be at. He can hit shots from deep. He can hit tough shots. Is he going to stand there as a freshman and be a 45% 3-point shooter? No, but he's a guy who can make shots pretty consistently. And I think once he gets used to the college game, he will make shots. And I think he'll draw fouls too, because he's a guy that teams are going to overplay that shot on. And if he's smart, he can pump fake, drive by, get into the teeth of the defense, maybe draw a foul. But I think that shooting ability is what everything is going to work off of for him. Long run, different answer. I think that it's toughness, leadership, all of those things. Short run, it's that shooting ability.
Coach?
I agree. Shooting, number one. But he's also a guy that I think can be a spark like Galloway a little bit too, because I think he wants to be in Indiana and he wants to win. He's been a winner at the high school level, and it's so important. Sometimes people look at the offensive skill or the footwork or how high you can jump, but sometimes winning matters just as much as those physical skills, and I think Anthony is a winner. And I think you can put him out there in another situation as a spark in that way as well. He's going to get out there because of his shooting. But think about this. These Indiana guys, and we've been clamoring, and whether it's right or not, wanting Indiana recruits and get old, stay old type guys. When were we ever upset with Armand Franklin's effort? He might have turned the ball over, taken a bad shot or whatever. I think Anthony is not necessarily the same type of player, basketball player, but he's going to be the same type of Indiana kid who's going to come in, and when he's out there, he's going to do everything he can do, and that is much needed in this program. And so and then he can make people better in practice too, because I just think he's going to push people for playing time, and other people are going to have to elevate to stay on the court and get some run.
Yeah, one more thing to notice for people when you're looking at recruiting rankings do not take into account things like winning. and being a part of a winning culture at a winning program, whatever. They evaluate individual skill and rank you. The winner part of it, we've got Indiana's starting to stockpile a lot of those guys.
You know, when you have three guys who played AAU together, as Lander and Leo and Galloway, too, that makes practice. Automatically, they're coming in and they're pushing. If they're on the second team, they're pushing that first team because they've been able to play. The older guys have experience advantage, but those younger players kind of know where the guy likes to pass, where he's going to be, and that's going to elevate. So the combination of those three playing AAU is something that I think we forget about these individual freshmen coming in, that the collectively, and if they can absorb Geronimo in that mentality and really push people in practice, that is a big plus for Indiana.
Yeah, so let's talk Geronimo as the lesser known of them, the lesser known commodity to IU fans, to Indiana fans. So, Coach, I'll throw this one to you first. Ian, what do you think is the key skill or attribute that gets Geronimo playing time if he earns that this year?
Well, I think if he can be some sort of asset defensively early on in his career with his athleticism, I think he's got the most upside. The level of competition is a concern of mine in high school, to understanding the game and playing at the level that the Big Ten will be. But, boy, he has a nice jump shot. He has some moves to dunk the basketball. But I think, you can never get enough guys to come in and give a 2-minute segment to stop someone defensively, whether that's more likely at the 3, but it could be at the 2, maybe even if he's physically enough to play some 4s if needed, because there's only 3 post players. So that would get him on the floor this year, and then the rest of his skill level will get him on the floor his sophomore through senior year.
Ryan?
I think it's his athleticism and his length. He's a very long player, and he's also, the thing about him that shows up on tape is that he's athletic in the fact that he can jump really high and stuff like that. But he's also great moving side to side. Like he can stop a driver, and that's something that a lot of guys, they're really good at going up and they're really good at going in a straight line. And you have to go to college to get that kind of side to side movement, cutting off driving lanes, all that, and get those instincts. He already has that. Now, is he as polished as some of the other guys who are going to, come into the Big Ten this year? No, of course not. He needs polish. He needs to work, and he's playing against better competition. That said, you watch him and you see a guy who can contribute. He also became a pretty good spot-up three-point shooter this year. He was, knocking down shots towards the end of the year that I think surprised a lot of people. Do I think that he's going to step on the floor in college and do that right away and be able to contribute from the three-point line as much? No. But I think that he's a guy whose athleticism and his ability to affect the game with that athleticism and length is going to get him on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you talk about wanting to get out and push the pace a little bit, he's a guy who fits really well from a athleticism running the floor. I think that fits in well if they're able to do that. And the shooting, if it does translate what we saw during that time that he started to rise up the recruiting rankings, given the general lack of interior players, could he be a stretch 4 in that scenario? I think that might become intriguing if they want to go that route. But I think, yeah, it's and he's talked, I think it was the interview he did with the Hoosier Hysterics about really wanting to be strong defensively. So that is the key to get to Archie's
heart. He has the build
as,
for it,
as we know. So I think he could be an effective defender. Coach, you said in the chat you have a player comp, but then
we don't like player
really,
comps.
so,
we don't like player
really
comps
sure
around here. So I just didn't know how else to put it in the chat. But and I don't think he's this player, but he kind of reminds me of OG a little bit with his athleticism, but yet it needs to develop. He has some smoothness, but yet it needs to be at a level in the Big Ten where OG came in and was feeling his way that first part of that freshman year and got a lot better.
He was a ball of potential, yeah.
Yeah, ball of potential, and then boom. And I'm not forecasting the NBA right away after 2 years, but I see him as that type of player that once he gets the understanding of the Big Ten level, his athleticism will help him do a lot of things that some players can't do that don't have his athleticism.
All right, so a little quicker on the next one. So what is something, again, we'll kind of go through each guy, but we'll do it quicker this time. What's something that could hold them back? So we'll kind of start back at the top with Lander. Ryan, what's something that might hold him back from being able to play as much as maybe people hope that he would?
Just as his youth and the lack of like physical build that some of the guys he's going to go up against have. He might put on weight, but he won't be used to it, and it's going to just take some time for adjustment for him because he's so young.
Coach, you agree with that or have something else?
Yeah, I agree totally. I will add playing undisciplined at a fast speed. There is playing fast, and then there's playing fast and being disciplined while you're playing fast. If he gets, DJ Carton had 7 turnovers against Indiana, and it hurt Ohio State. He might have, but you string together 3 or 4 of those games, you're going to see your minutes decline until you get a handle on it in practice. So I think undisciplined, fast-paced play could limit his time.
Yeah, I think that what you guys brought up are the ones with him. Trey Galloway, what holds him back from getting on the floor? Coach, I'll go to you first on this one.
Shooting. If people aren't going to guard him, then we're back to what has been seen the last couple of years, where the lane's clogged up for Trace Jackson Davis. I think that would be his number one issue to limit his time.
I think it's his wrist injury. If his wrist injury is healthy, I think eventually the shooting's going to come. So that's what I kind of root it all back into, is he's struggled with that for a couple of years now.
Yeah, and I think that's what people will, based on scouting reports, things like that. When he comes on the floor initially, that's what opponents are going to do with him, is basically force him to make shots. And to your point, that wrist injury is healed. He gets it back to a little bit where he was earlier in his high school career. I think some of those fears alleviate. But again, depending upon who you're putting him out there with, if he looks like a non-shooter initially, we're all going to be having flashbacks on that. Anthony Leal, Ryan, what's the thing or two that might hold him back from getting in there?
Just athleticism and getting more athletic in the weight program. I think that you have marked down on there, lateral quickness, and I think that's what it is. Can he guard the ball? And he's going to have to play guard. Can he guard the ball? And there's going to be guys wanting to drive by him. So how much help do his teammates need to give him off the ball?
Coach?
I think defensively will be his issue. You saw it last year with the freshman Armand Franklin, and we always talked about him being handsy on the drives and leaning, getting his head too far over. Defending at the college level is a lot different than at the high school level, even though they've played good competition AAU in high school. He's going to have to be able to show Archie that he can guard in order to get major minutes. And
it's worth mentioning that Leal is a want-to defender. He had the effort. It's not a question of effort. It's a question of the physical limitations he has. That, again, college weight program can help you mitigate those. So it's just how far does he get?
Yeah, I think the other thing with him that it really doesn't have anything to do with him, but it's almost how the guys in front of him play at the position that he wants to get in there for. If you see a good jump from Armand Franklin, if we see a healthy Rob Fennessy, if Lander is able to acclimate quickly to the college game, what you get out of Al. Minutes dry
maybe
up.
It's a red shirt,
Minutes dry up pretty fast in that scenario. That may really not be anything of Anthony Leal's doing, other than he's kind of starting from behind these other guys and things like that. So I'll throw that out as at least a different option. And then Geronimo, Coach, I'll throw this one to you. What's maybe something that holds him back despite the athleticism that we talked about?
Just ready to play at the Big Ten level on a consistent basis. I just think it's a big jump from where he's coming from. Can he handle that? If not, then he will get some limited minutes.
Yeah, Ryan, what about you?
I think that how ready is he? How polished is he? And also, again, same as you suggested. I mean, does everybody else stay healthy? Are the minutes there? I think with the Justin Smith transfer, it's more likely he plays, but how much? And we've seen there are a lot of guys there who could take those minutes.
And Andy, I said I saw what you put in the chat. I think minutes will always rotate, depending on scouting report, who's playing well in practice, who's got the hot hand, or who best fits playing against Illinois versus who's best against Minnesota, or what they need. Yeah. And so therefore, it's really hard to sit there and say it's going to be a certain rotation or a certain amount of minutes. I think it's a luxury for Archie to be able to use those guys deeper in the rotation for specifics that are going to be needed per the game plan and scouting report per opponent.
Yeah, I really think with all these guys, with the with a likely exception of Lander, there's going to be a lot of ebbs and flows of minutes that these guys play over the course of time versus what's needed in there. I would echo a lot of what you guys said with Geronimo. I think the competition level may respond well to it, but what he played against in high school is not necessarily going to be a great preparation for him. So we'll see how that goes. The athleticism we think can translate, but the physicality and some of those things, you never really know. So a couple last questions here. We can just rapid fire these. So who has the clearest path to playing time besides Lander? Ryan, I'll go to you first on this one.
I would say it's probably Galloway because of the energy. I think that he may not be the best player of the remaining three, But I think that just because this team will need an energy boost, I think he's the guy.
Yeah, Coach,
and I agree. That would be my number one pick. The next in line is Geronimo because you can always use athleticism in certain spots.
And there's room on the wing.
Reasons.
Let's be real.
Yeah.
Justin Smith's gone. There's room on the wing.
Yeah, that Geronimo, I probably would say Galloway, although Geronimo for me was close, and I think it's a little bit of the opposite of what I said about Anthony Leal, where there's a bit of a log jam there at the position that he plays. I mean, Geronimo's 6'6", 6'7", I think. If he's able to use his athleticism in a way that allows him to defend other teams that are playing small at the 4 or different things like that, I think he might be able to get there because it's not a place that IU has a ton of depth. If you look down the roster,
yeah.
If it turns out IU doesn't want to use Jerome Hunter at the 4, we all kind of talked about that. We weren't really sure how you might be able to hold up to that physically. What does that mean about minutes restrictions? He might already be on, different things like that. If that doesn't shake out, then seems like there's a road to that for Geronimo. But again, how many minutes a game that means is up in the air.
And just to add, none of us mentioned Anthony Leal. If Anthony Leal hits campus and as the season's rolling around, he's hitting 40% from 3, he'll be the first one off the bench. You know, I mean, like this team needs shooting. So it all depends on if he gets hot, he could be the first guy off the bench, you know? So it really, we don't know. It's all going to depend, but all of these guys can contribute, I think, in some way or another. It's just going to depend on how the minutes fall out.
And it's also important that if we play, depending on the schedule, throwing these freshmen in against the Big Ten right away and playing 20 Big Ten games only, they may not see as many minutes as you would see them early, getting some feet wet in some games you're going to win by 20, 25 and can get guys some minutes and then let them evolve into a role where they can play more in the Big Ten. So it might be a little scarce minute-wise just because of the schedule if things are delayed.
At least you don't teach English, right?
I don't teach much of anything. I just show up and have a good time with my students.
All right. So do either of you think that anybody redshirts? I know there's not there's really 11 scholarship guys at this point. Does anybody take a redshirt outside of an injury situation, or do you think they all get to play a little bit?
I think they'll all play. I think the top candidate for redshirt, given what this team needs, might be Leal or Geronimo, just depending. I think Geronimo's going to play. I mean, I think they're all going to play, but if you had to pick a redshirt candidate, maybe Leal, because there's some depth at the guard spots with Lander coming in early. If Lander hadn't come in early, I'd say Leal was definitely going to play, but no, I don't think anybody's going to redshirt.
Yeah, Coach, what about you?
I think I like the redshirt idea. I think Villanova uses it well. I think programs that use it well get old and stay old and have really good veterans. I like what Race Thompson has done, and he's had a year, so it's worked here at Indiana. But I think it takes a real special young man and family and everyone to understand that they're really on a 5-year program, not a 4-year program, and we don't know what's being talked about. There might be a freshman that is going into it with that idea, but I think all these guys can play and play some. And if you're going to have it might be more of an idea if it is a shortened season back to January. That might push a red shirt more than we would normally think. But given everything as normal right now and Maui going on for Ryan to go, I assume that all 11 will suit up and play.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think if it's anything resembling a normal season, I think they all play. If it gets shorter, I think that's where the possibility for that increases. But time will tell with that. So. All right. Well, coming up on the assembly call, we'll answer your questions, including one that ties in well with our freshman topic on the evening. Stick with us here on the assembly call. That was 25 minutes, but we weren't that long in the first segment, so we still got time.
If Smith would have stayed, then I think Geronimo might have been a better candidate to redshirt because there was some depth at the – and I think Geronimo and Galloway are outsized to play the 4, but you never know. You can throw them in there for a minute or two with their athleticism, toughness. So
if both teams are playing 4 out, I mean, then you're essentially just another small forward. I mean, and that's what a lot of teams are doing these days. So you're playing 4 out, 1 in. And having like a dedicated post and then 4 guys who play on the perimeter and cut through. And you might get some post ups out of that, but they're not dedicated, 2 dedicated post guys. Like,
Leal, I don't think Leal will unless it's been discussed, but he's the one right now that has a lot of people ahead of him. in the guard spot and the wings, unless he comes and earns it.
Especially with the way Al played at the end of last year, making some shots and being more clutch. I mean, you may be a situation where you can't take that guy out.
Speaking of which, I did a little segment in the community on Al's shooting, and he was his first 10 games, he was 43%. The last 10 games, he was 41.2%. And then he ended up at 38. He had like a 12 game where he had a lot of zeros. Some of that was in the Big Ten, but the last 10 were in the Big Ten.
Did he hurt his thumb or wrist or somewhere one of those games in the middle of the season, or am I thinking of somebody else?
He might have been. Was that the last year?
Or am I just completely making shit up? I'm not sure.
Hey, you can't swear on this. Now we got to label it explicit.
No, that's not. It's not on the Ryan. Do we have to explain to you again how the podcast works and what's actually on the podcast or not? We're in the break. It's okay. It's a safe space in the break. It's fine.
But his form looked really good. Nice elevation, relatively square to the ball. At times
he shifts his body.
Yeah, he turns his hips at times.
A lot of lefties do that. I don't know what it is about our body.
And that's probably when he gets off, is when he's really turning and it's throwing the ball left or right.
Yeah, and he's line drive. You typically when you turn like that, you lose the power out of your legs, and it's all arm, and so it line drives it, and it's more on your wrist. No, it's funny because you look at left-handed baseball pitchers, and they all throw 3/4. They don't throw straight overhead, and right-handers typically throw right overhead. And I asked a pitcher, I was like, why is that? And he just said, well, because look at your body inside. Look at the internal part of your body. Your organs aren't symmetrical. Like, it's different. And so your body, when it develops, is protecting those organs differently in the way they do. And he said that, the body chemistry is different. And so that's why it happens. And there are rare, great examples of great lefty shooters. There aren't as many great lefty shooters as there are righty shooters over the course of the year. Now that's changing because people are younger, are getting into shooting programs, getting private coaches and all that stuff. For the longest time, there used to be a thing in basketball where people were like, if that guy's a left-handed, don't let him shoot. Like that was an adage for a long time in basketball. Do not let that guy shoot. He's a lefty. But no, Al in high school did not look like a shooter at all. And he's proven everybody wrong by not changing
his shot. Got so much better before his junior year. It got more elevation, as you're saying. It wasn't as flat and line drive. It popped up. Here's an odd thing. We have
he follows through every time. Well,
good high follow through. We have 4 right-handed shooters on our basketball team that play baseball, and they all pitch left-handed. It is the weirdest thing.
Really weird.
Because they're playing AAU baseball or travel baseball, and I see clips their high school coach throw, and they're all throwing left-handed. And they come in the gym, they're shooting right-handed. I don't know if the baseball program, and we're pretty successful in baseball state-wise, that they just get them at a young age. They start throwing left-handed because you don't see many left-handed pitchers in high school, and it's crazy.
It's interesting. Go figure. Yeah, who are you doing next in the? I watched your Coach's Corner thing today. Who you got next week, Finney? Yeah, Al's got a lot of good. His elevation was good. A couple of those clips you had really showed that, and the follow through was really, really good.
Yeah, and for a 6-minute video, I'm not going to go through and find all his misses. I probably should to do a good thorough and show his misses, but
or maybe just show.
Nobody wants to rewatch the misses.
I showed one miss and it was long. But I think I did enough to say that when he does miss, he falls off to one side, he floats, he doesn't stick his jump shot, and which is, but I'm interested to see the form. I think all the guys have right form, but why aren't we better shooters? But
yeah, and I think Finney's problem sometimes is I think he questions himself a lot.
Yep.
So he holds on to the ball too long.
On the way down, it's awful to shoot.
Yeah. He jumps and he kind of is questioning and then he lets it go instead of it's got to be one motion and thought, just go.
He's got to turn loose his whole game.
Yeah, he does.
His probably would be one.
Loose.
His probably would be one to show some misses, compare the misses to some makes and just see what the differences are.
All right, I'll go back and get his worst game. I'll get shots from his worst game and his best game.
There you go. All right, so we got about 5.5 minutes. We'll definitely do Jay's question on freshmen, and then we can either talk Elam Ending or Jared had the question in there about the Sheehy thing, but I don't know if either of you have listened to the Sheehy.
I haven't listened to it. No.
I have not.
I haven't. I want to when I exercise tomorrow.
I did. It was really entertaining. Like it really made me. He was always a fun guy to watch, but he just I liked his attitude and whatever else. So we'll probably skip that one. We can talk Elam Ending if we got time left, but the freshman one could probably take a little bit of time. And worst case, I could throw the the Sheehy one in, and I can kind of give it because there was something another one that stood out to me. So I'll keep you guys posted in the chat with what time I got left. But by my math, we have 5 minutes and 38 seconds before we got to do the outro. So, all right, here we go.
Hey, it's Romeo Langford. What's the only thing better than hitting a game winner to beat Wisconsin? Celebrate it with friends afterwards. Join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
All right, thank you, Romeo. Figured he was a good one to include given the focus on freshmen in tonight's episode. Welcome back to the assembly call. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and the coach, Brian Tonsoni. Remember, you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason. And after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. It's now time for our mailbag. All questions submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can find out more about at assemblycall.com/community. And gentlemen, we have a certain kind of question that we always like to get from our friend Jay.
It's not that good, but it's not that bad. It's Jay's mediocre question.
This was actually a relatively good question, probably slightly better than mediocre. So Jay's question, based on the freshmen, what are your favorite freshman seasons from previous IU players? Not necessarily the best freshman seasons, but the ones you enjoyed the most. Ryan, I'll throw this one to you first.
I love Thomas Bryant's freshman year. I loved his energy and just the infectious nature of his personality. And, in 2016, when they won the Big Ten title, I thought he was such a huge part of it. And I loved seeing him. I don't have the stats in front of me. I'm sure they were very nice, but it was not just that. It was just who he was as a person, getting everybody involved. And I think that he was part of that big turnaround of that season was his personality, keeping everybody loose and cheering on his teammates. And you remember him. I mean, the guy was starting and, looked like a future first-round draft pick, and he was waving a towel when the walk-ons were on at the end of the game. So I just loved his personality. That was a fun season for me to follow.
Yeah, that group of him, OG and Juwan as freshmen, those guys were a good group coming in. Coach, what about you?
Always interesting. Back in the day, there wasn't much recruiting hype, so you learned about the freshmen when they started playing, and you didn't have this preconceived notion of what was going to happen. But Steve Alford comes to mind going to the Elite Eight his freshman year in 1984. Damon Bailey was very heralded as an eighth grader, and everyone was excited about seeing his freshman year. Again, I don't have the stats in front of me, but Yogi Ferrell stands out to me that he finished that squad that was ranked number one, had the number one seed. That squad was good the year before he got there. I think he added that in. I like good numbers, but I also like winning, impact on winning. Eric Gordon had a really solid freshman year, and that was an interesting recruiting thing with stealing him legally or illegally, whatever, from Illinois. That was an interesting.
What are you saying, Coach?
Definitely legally.
Yeah, legally. But there's a lot, and I think sometimes expectations, you have to say Romeo had a good freshman year. I know a lot of people don't think so because Indiana didn't make the tournament, but his stats stood out. So there have been a lot of freshmen. I think the more recent ones get a lot of hype because we've been watching them for 2 or 3 years on the recruiting, and we either are happy with their freshman year or not happy with their freshman year because of that. Those expectations.
Jared had put in Brian Evans's freshman year, which was a good one. I think he redshirted, right? Am I remembering that correctly? And then he came in. I think that it was the Michigan game at Michigan against the Fab Five. He came off the bench and drilled a few threes, played really well. I'm pretty sure that was his freshman season. The other couple that stood out to me, one was AJ Guyton. This one maybe a little bit more personal, but he was an unheralded guy coming in. But it was also my freshman year at IU. He lived down the hall from me at Briscoe with Luke Jimenez, and so it was kind of. One, it was cool initially to know there's a basketball player that was on your same floor, but then for him to really turn into what he was as a freshman was really cool to see. Just was always a humble guy, nice guy to pass in the hallway and talk to. So He was one. And then, Jay Edwards was another one that came to mind. Look back at this, shot over 53% from three as a freshman. Now, he did have the suspension in the middle of it, so that wasn't great. So his actual number of games wasn't that of some of the other guys. But he, him and Lyndon Jones coming in from Marion after all they had accomplished in high school was a cool one. So those were the other couple that stood out to me that I remembered. I mean, even Calbert Chaney, quite honestly, we'd be remiss not to mention him. I mean, to come in really from the jump was producing at a high level when he came in. So lots of good freshman season. That was definitely a good question, guys. We got about 20 seconds left. We talked about this a little bit during one of the breaks. So we talked about TBT earlier. Quick thoughts on the Elam ending, Coach. I'll throw it to you.
Traditionalists don't like it, but I'm starting to enjoy it a little bit more. Don't think it's ready for the college game.
Ryan?
I enjoy it. It makes games exciting, but nope.
All right. Well, I think it made those games exciting. I don't see it making a transition into the college game anytime soon, but we'll see if that changes. All right. Well, that'll do it for tonight's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing most of the music you hear on the show. And thank you for listening. Talk to you again next Thursday night. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right. I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
All righty. We are done.
I'm ordering dinner right now, so you guys just.
Okay, so quick story about the mediocre question, Jay Horry. So I was watching this golf special. Pat Mayo does some DFS golf, who to play on DraftKings and all that. So I was watching his live show on Wednesday, and I see Jay in the chat ask a question. And this host is known for, if you ask a bad question, you get banned for life. He doesn't like to mess around with bad questions. And Jay's question, he read it and he got all ticked. He goes, "Jay, I ought to ban you for life." And I thought that was the most hilarious thing.
Perfect.
I DM'd him right away. I said, "Man, you've gone from mediocre to banned for life." So if we don't like his questions anymore, Jay should be banned for life.
Nice.
I'm with it.
This week was a good one though. It fit with the theme, so we'll.
This one was good.
We'll keep him around for another week before we cut him loose. Yeah, Jared's other question about the Will Sheehy thing. He talked about what stood out to him was his was that the 2013-14 team was even more of a train wreck internally than it seemed watching them. That definitely was true and was a takeaway from that. The takeaway for me from the Sheehy interview was, and they did this when they had the kind of reunion show with a bunch of the guys from that team, was just how worn down they were emotionally and physically and mentally by the time they got to the tournament the year prior to that. Even leading into the Syracuse game, talked about they didn't finish the season that strong. They did win the Michigan game to win the Big Ten, but didn't play well in the Big Ten tournament. Even, kind of talked about looking around a couple guys who clearly didn't want to be there. And at that point, it were just really the weight of the expectations and everything that was that season, kind of what it did to them over the course of the season and things like that. But it was definitely disappointing to hear him, talk through what his senior season was really like. And,
when he was that was supposed to be like his big step up year.
Yeah. That last one was stepping up, and it was just a really, but from the sounds of it, miserable experience for him, personally for different reasons. I think played well at the end of it. I think once he'd finally, come to terms with some of the way things were going and why it was going, how it was going. But yeah, that was disappointing, but I really did enjoy the interview. Definitely.
How long is it?
It's a good few hours. I feel like, okay.
They don't do short.
No, they don't. I mean,
I usually have to break it up over
I feel like
3 sessions of working out.
I feel like it was a little bit over 3. I might be remembering that wrong, but yeah, it was good. It definitely was one where it's feels like would be a fun guy to just go have a beer with and hang out. He was,
as long as he lets me make fun of his tattoo, I'm good.
He did talk a little bit about his tattoos and things like that. So yeah, it's a little bit over 3 hours now. Not all of that is the podcast itself is a little bit over 3 hours, but not all of it is with him since I've got their intro and outro. But definitely, listen to it over a few sittings, if you will. But it was good. I enjoyed it. So yeah, I caught up on those last week. I actually didn't have a ton of meetings, so I was able to just kind of put those on while I was working and catch up on that. So all right.
Without listening, there's a lot to talk about too. Sometimes we get down to how do you structure a basketball season? Our program, we go 45 minutes to an hour at the last 2 or 3 weeks, hitting key things. Some coaches still go way too long.
Yeah.
Interesting to hear him say that they were, that can wear on people if you have the same schedule, the same, 3 hours or 2 hour practices or whatever. You got to, a lot of this is psychological and mental too, as you get down at the end of the season. There's a lot to college basketball besides just what we see on game night. So
yeah, they talked about on that more the reunion one where they had Cody and Watford and Hulls on and a bunch of the guys on. They talked about the leading up to that Michigan game at the end that they had just a huge week between that and the Ohio State game, and they just talked about how just dead their legs were even in that game, and some of those things. Yeah, definitely for those who want to have formulate some questions about the method to the madness that was Tom Crean. It sheds a little light on it. It doesn't really answer any of the questions. Really just generates questions of like why would you do that and different things of that nature. But that's probably a show for another time.
Did you guys catch the Goodman podcast on the Brink?
Yeah, that was really good.
That was really good too. For just talking about, expected Archie to be better at this point, but understand why he's where he's at and he's made consistent progress. I really enjoyed that podcast as well. That was eye-opening.
That one was really good. I think
I'll
when
have
they
to
asked him
listen
what
to
the
it.
word
That's
to
on my
describe
list
it,
too.
he was like, I think he said steady, but not spectacular, which I think is probably as good a word as you can do to describe it. Yeah, that one was really enjoyable as well. So, all right. Well, I think that'll do it. I think next week we'll probably talk Archie, I think is what we had talked through in the
Hey, anybody in Indiana know how to build a porch? I got a wall that's fallen in my basement, so I got to tear up my back porch and excavate and then build a porch. So
wow.
Anyone want to help me out? I can pay you in money or beer or whatever.
Or
yeah, Ryan.
Folksy insight.
There's a little water on the
insight.
This guy came out today and he walked in the basement and he took one look. He said, "Whoa!" I was like, "Oh man."
Yeah, nothing's to code. You got to do this.
Yeah. So now we
once
got to
they
rebuild
start
the
picking
wall.
around, you're done.
So, yeah.
All right, guys. Well, good luck with that, Coach.
Yeah.
You can always escape to San Diego, buddy.
He said, he goes, a good rain and your wall's going to cave in. So I told Andy beforehand, if you see this side just come flying in, take me out. Call 911 and.
I think my podcast co-host is buried alive in his basement.
Because his basement wall caved in.
Exactly. All right. Well, Coach, evacuate yourself from there to.
Yeah, seriously.
I know. I just come out to San Diego for 2 weeks until it's fixed.
Man, you come on out.
Don't need to bring a razor. Just hang out.
Look at me. It's loving it.
We're actively trying not to. I don't know why you're.
Yeah. I mean, you're stuck doing it. So
yeah, we have no choice.
It's what you signed up for, my friend.
Anyway,
all right, everybody.
I don't know if that's true, but anyway.
All right, guys.
All right, thanks everybody. We'll talk to you next week. Everybody,
see you,
stay
chat
safe.
mob.
All right,
later, guys.
See you guys.